So Proptech, I feel like everyone now knows this term Proptech. It's almost ubiquitous. And it kind of has an interesting history, which is there was no such thing as Proptech. When we were evaluating the opportunity, no one was using this phrase. It was kind of called, if anything at all, it was called real estate tech. If you looked though at funding, there was about $4 billion of private venture capital funding that went into what we today call Proptech. That number today has grown to $32 billion a year. So there's been this profound, almost exponential growth. And I think what's exciting is that Fifth Wall, in some way, has been a part of that wave. And I like to think kind of propelled it forward, both with our capital, of course, and committing to great entrepreneurs and great companies that are changing the real estate industry, but I think also in terms of awareness, like awareness of how big this opportunity is, which I think is good for the whole ecosystem, good for entrepreneurs that aren't funded by Fifth Wall, good for other venture funds, good for Proptech entrepreneurs that are thinking of their next company. To me, it kind of just shows that there are so many opportunities in tech. And one of the things I think is so cool about Proptech is if you think about how tech has collided with our lives individually, personally, we got lots of kind of Web 1, Web 2, and now we call it Web 3 technology that made our lives in a virtual world better. So we can go on Amazon and buy things. We can go on Facebook and Instagram and communicate with people. And there's a bunch of different apps that make our virtual lives better. But we live our lives here, right here, in the here and now, in the terrestrial world. And that's what Proptech is. Proptech is where technology, innovation, is colliding with everywhere around us. The places we live, the homes we live in, the offices we work in, the stores we shop in, the factories we make stuff in. Sometimes the most obvious opportunities are hiding in plain sight. And that's what's so interesting about real estate. It's everywhere, it's ubiquitous, it's where we live. It's so right in front of us, it's so obvious, you don't notice it. You don't notice that this is where we create the economy. When we started, and I had this experience of going to these venture capitalists and talking to them about what opportunities they were seeing in the marketplace, I would typically ask them, how do you create alpha, right? How do you generate your returns? Repeatably, durably, consistently? How do you do that? And what I started to come to personally was that a lot of venture funds are kind of like wildcatters back in the day in the oil industry. What happened is a bunch of entrepreneurs threw down oil wells in different places all over the ground. And some of them hit oil and some of them didn't. And that's luck, that's chance. But here's the thing. Those who hit oil thought it was because they were so good at predicting where oil would be. But in fact, they were no better than your average person. So as I kind of reflected on that, I said, well, how could Fifth Wall, as a new venture capital fund with no track record, no experience, how could we engineer a way to repeatably create alpha so that we're not wildcatting? And that was our approach to bringing in corporate LPs, which was at the time entirely novel and unique, and there was really no precedent for. I came to the conclusion that I think venture capital needed to be built differently, that the world didn't need another venture capital fund. There was enough of them. And so if we were going to create one, we had to do something unique. Our eyes were certainly bigger than our stomach at the time, because it's really complicated. Venture capital is an asset management industry. It's regulated, it's complicated. You have very large commitments of capital from investors, lots of sophisticated legal agreements. I didn't know any of that, like any of it. But I think because of that inexperience, it gave us a perspective that would have been hard to get had we been in the industry. When it comes to moments where I was doubting myself and doubting the creation of Fifth Wall, there were many. Sometimes companies at the outset, you run into what I like to call like static friction, which is there's so many things you have to overcome that the amount of force required to overcome all those variables needs to be so high, and there's some tipping point where it flips. And before you hit that tipping point, it's just awful. It was awful for me. I remember sitting in my apartment, and we had no office, and I've been working on this for 4 months, 5 months. Obviously, I have no job. This is all I'm doing, no salary, and I just can't seem to get this capital closed. I know there's interest, but it's not converting. And so I was kind of left in this twilight, in this like netherworld of like kind of existing but not existing. And that's a really emotionally volatile time for any entrepreneur. And there was a moment there where I was like, I've had enough. Just walking around, pacing around my kitchen, like, and I was just frustrated and kind of feeling helpless because I had the confidence that what we were doing would work, but like all things, it's not enough to just have it on your own. You need other people, and in particular, in our case, we needed investors. I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs that have tough moments like that, and it sounds trite, I guess, to say, but sometimes you just need to give good ideas time.